Microsoft Certified Azure Security Engineer. This is an assessment for the review questions for the Security Engineer Associate from Microsoft Learn. So if you are studying for this certification or if you are ready to take the exam, you may want to stick along and take a look at this. These are the courses or the modules for the preparation for this certification. I would strongly encourage you to go to all these modules. There are also a lot of demonstrations and there are also some labs that you can go through. If you have a Microsoft account, if not, you can create a trial account as well. I am not going to read all the choices, basically just going to read out the questions and then provide the correct answer with some explanations. Question number one. By the way, I am Ciolito Rodriguez. One, you are implementing an Azure Kubernetes service AKS cluster for a production workload. You need to ensure that the cluster meets the following requirements. One, provides the highest networking performance possible. And two, manage ingress traffic by using Kubernetes tools. What should you use? The correct answer is CNI networking with ingress resources and controllers. CNI networking provides the best performance since it does not require IP forwarding and user-defined routes. And ingress controllers can be managed from within Kubernetes. Kubernetes networking requires defined routes and IP forwarding, making the network slower. And Azure load balancers cannot be managed by using Kubernetes tools. And here is an image that I created using ChatGPT that basically illustrate this ingress controllers, the CNI networking with ingress controllers resources. Question two, you have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure Container Registry named ACR1 and a username user1. You need to ensure that user1 can administer images in ACR1. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which two roles should you assign to user1? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. The correct answers are arc delete, or actually ACR delete and ACR push. To administer images in ACR1, a user must be able to push and pull images to ACR1 and delete images from ACR1. The ACR push and ACR delete roles are required to push, pull, and delete images in ACR1. ACR pull only allows the push image permission, not pull. Actually, this is wrong from Microsoft. It should be that the ACR pull only allows the pull image permission, not the push. And so in this case, so I think that that was wrong over there. Contributor can also perform these operations. However, it also has many additional permissions, which means that it does not follow the principle of least privilege. And reader and ACR image signer do not have adequate permissions. Question three, your company has an Azure subscription and an Amazon Web Services AWS account. You plan to deploy Kubernetes to AWS. You need to ensure that you can use Azure Monitor Container Insights to monitor container workloads performance. What should you deploy first? The correct answer is Azure Arc Enable Kubernetes. Azure Arc Enable Kubernetes is the only configuration that includes Kubernetes and can be deployed to AWS. Question 4. You have an Azure subscription. You plan to use the AZ-AKS create command to deploy an Azure Kubernetes Service AKS cluster named AKS1 that has Microsoft Entra integration. You need to ensure the local accounts cannot be used in AKS. Which flag should you use with the command? And the correct answer is disable local accounts. When deploying an AKS cluster, local accounts are enabled by default. Even when enabling RBAC or Microsoft Entra integration, --admin access still exists essentially as a non-audible backdoor option. To disable local accounts on an AKS cluster, you should use the disable local accounts flag with the AKS create command. The remaining options do not remove local accounts. Question 5. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure Container Registry named CR1. You use Azure CLI to authenticate to the subscription. You need to authenticate to CR1 by using Azure CLI. Which command should you run? The correct answer is AZ-ACR login. The AZ-ACR login command is needed to authenticate to an Azure Container Registry from the Azure CLI. Docker login is used to sign in to a Docker repository. AZ-ACR config is used for configuring Azure Container Registry, and AZ-ACR credential is used for managing login credentials for Azure Container Registry. Question 6. You need to implement access control for Azure files. The solution must provide the highest level of security. What should you use? The correct answer is Microsoft Entra. Microsoft Entra is supported by Azure Files and follows the principle of least privilege. SAS is unsupported by Azure Files. A storage account key is supported by Azure Files, but it does not follow the principle of least privilege. Question 7. You need to allow only Microsoft Entra authenticated principals to access an existing Azure SQL database. Which 3 actions should you perform? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. The correct answers are 1. Add a Microsoft Entra administrator. 2. Assign your account the SQL Security Manager built-in role. And 3. Connect to the database by using the Azure portal. Adding a Microsoft Entra administrator and assigning your account the SQL Security Manager built-in role are prerequisites for enabling Microsoft Entra only authentication. Selecting support only Microsoft Entra authentication for this server enforces the Azure SQL logical server to use Microsoft Entra authentication, and a connection to the data plane of the logical server is not needed. Question 8. You have an application that runs on premises and store data in an Azure SQL database. You need to ensure that certain columns stored in the database can only be decrypted by the application and cannot be accessed by users managing the Azure SQL. What should you enable for the database? The correct answer here is always encrypted. Enabling always encrypted saves the encrypted data and only the client driver can decrypt it. TDE, or transparent data encryption, still allows users managing the database to see the data. Dynamic data masking does not encrypt anything. It just masks data and it still allows users to unmask it at the database level if they have unmasked permissions. Symmetric key encryption uses keys stored in a SQL database, not the client application. Here is kind of like a diagram how it works. But again, the data is the client driver basically is what manages the encryption. So basically what that means that even the administrators of the database, when you use always encrypted, the people that manage the database are not able to see the encrypted data. Question 9, you need to provide public anonymous access to a file in an Azure storage account. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which two actions should you perform? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. The correct answers are for the container, set the public access level to blob, and for the storage account, you set the blob public access to enabled. Unless prevented by another setting public access level to blob allows public access to the blob only. Setting blob public access to enable is a prerequisite for setting the access level of container or blob. Setting blob public access to disable prevents any public access. And setting public access level to container also allows any current and future blobs in the container, which does not follow the principle of least privilege here. Question 10. Your organization uses Microsoft Azure SQL Managed Instance for its database needs. Recently, there have been concerns about unauthorized access to sensitive data within the databases. You need to ensure all database activities are logged and stored for auditing. What should you do? The correct answer here is store audit logs in Azure Blob Storage with an immutable log store. So here's a screenshot of a storage account. When you create a storage account, or you can modify this later, you can enable the enable version level immutability support. What this does is that it allows you to set time-based retention policies for blob versions. You can set a default policies at the account or container level, or set policies for a specific blobs or versions. So version is required for this property to be enabled. Storing audit logs in Azure Blob Storage with an immutable log store is effective because it ensures all database activities are securely logged and protected against tampering, which is essential for compliance and security. Enabling Microsoft Defender for SQL focuses on providing threat protection for SQL databases, which does not address the need for logging database activities. Enabling SQL Server Audit can log activities but requires additional steps to ensure logs are stored securely and immutably. Using Azure Monitor logs is intended for collecting and analyzing log data, not specifically for storing audit logs, making it unsuitable for this requirement. Question 11. You have a Microsoft Entra tenant. All the users in the tenant have Windows devices that are Microsoft Entra joined. You need to implement multi-factor authentication, MFA. The solution must ensure that Azure MFA can be used without internet access or mobile network availability. Which authentication method should you use? The correct answer here is Windows Hello for Business. This is a screenshot of the Windows Hello for Business option. This is the in Windows Intune. So in Windows Intune, if you go to the dashboard, then you go to device enrollment, and then you choose Windows, you can again configure Windows Hello for Business for all devices that have been enrolled in Windows Intune. So what that means is that yes, you could do this either with a group policy or Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Management, but in a modern environment where people are using Microsoft Intune, this is the best way of doing this. When you configure Microsoft Entra MFA, you can configure authentication to use Windows Hello for Business. With this method, users will sign in by using a biometric factor such as a fingerprint or require a PIN to be entered on the device. With Windows Hello for Business, validation is performed locally. And this is the key point. The thing is that if you use a pin, for example, that pin, it's only used on that local computer. It could never be used on the internet. That's why it makes it very secure. Internet access or mobile network are not needed, nor required. The remaining options in the questions require a mobile network or a network connection to provide authentication. Question 12. You have a Microsoft Entra tenant. Users have both Windows and non-Windows devices. All users have smartphones. You plan to implement Microsoft Entra Multi-Factor Authentication, or MFA. You need to ensure that MFA is used to authenticate users to Azure resources. The solution must be implemented without any additional cost. Which three MFA methods should you implement? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. The correct answers are 1. SMS verification, 2. The Microsoft Authenticator app, and 3. Voice call verification. Here is a screenshot of the authentication methods on the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, where you would choose whatever method it's that you wanted to use. The Microsoft Authenticator app, SMS verification, and voice call verification only require a smartphone. Because all users already have smartphones, those three options don't require any additional cost. Windows Hello for Business requires that all users would have Windows devices, which is not the case. FIDO keys need to be purchased, which introduces additional costs, and OAuth tokens require a third-party app to be purchased. Question 13. You have an Azure subscription that contains a Microsoft Entra tenant and an Azure web app named App1. A username user1 needs permission to manage App1. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which role should you assign to user1? The correct answer here is the Cloud Application Administrator. Cloud Application Administrator. Since App1 is an app in Azure, this role provides administrative permissions to App1 and follows the principle of least privilege. application administrator. This role provides administrative permissions to App 1, but also provides additional permissions to the app proxy for on-premises applications. Cloud App Security Administrator. This role is specific to the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps solution. And application developer, this role allows the user to create registrations but not manage applications. Question 14. You need to provide an administrator with the ability to configure access reviews in Microsoft Entra Privileged Identity Management, or PIM. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which role should you assign to the administrator? The correct answer is Privilege Role Administrator. Privileged Role Administrator can manage PIM. Assigning the global administrator role does not follow the principle of least privilege. Security administrators have permissions to manage security-related features. Privileged authentication administrators can set or reset any authentication method, including passwords, for any user, including global administrators. Question 15. You have an Azure subscription named Sub1 that contains the following resources. 1, a resource group named RG1 that contains a virtual machine named VM1. 2, a resource group named RG2 that has an Azure App Service plan named ASP1 and a web app named App1. You need to provide a user with the ability to perform the following tasks. 1, list web apps hosted in ASP1. And 2, create new virtual machines in RG1. Which 2 actions should you perform? The correct answer is assigning the user the contributor role in the RG1 scope, and 2, assigning the user the reader role for sub 1. Now, this question, I have a little bit of problem with this question. This is the answer provided by Microsoft. In a previous assessment that I recorded, if anyone has watched that, the answer that I provided was assigning the user the reader role for ASP1, because the question specifically says that you want to list web apps hosted in ASP. So given the reader role on the sub1 doesn't actually follow the principle of least privilege. Actually, let's see. Which 2 actions should you perform? Now, they don't say anything about least privilege, so that's why maybe they are choosing that answer there. But anyway, so assigning the user the reader role for the sub1 will permit the user to list the web apps in ASP and also grant the reader role to any future resources when they are added. So I think that that's the rationale for this question. But again, so they do not say anything about least privilege. So let's go that, yeah, that would be the right answer. Assigning the contributor role in the RG1 scope allows the user to create new resources within the resource group. Assigning the user the reader role for ASP will only provide access to ASP and no other future resources. And so this is the question that I chose on the first time, but again, so I think that we're clear now that why it should be the subscription, and again, you cannot directly create your own denied assignments for the other choice there. Question 16. You have a Microsoft Entra tenant and an Amazon Web Services AWS account. You plan to implement Microsoft Entra Permissions Management to manage the permissions granted to all the identities across Microsoft Entra ID and AWS. You purchase the required license for permissions management. You need to use permissions management to manage permissions in Microsoft Entra ID and AWS. What should you configure first? The correct answer is data collectors. This is the permissions management component in Microsoft Entra Admin Center. To start using Entra permission management, you first need to configure data collection from the permission management portal, which we just saw over there. This will enable you to onboard services such as Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. All other items can be configured after you enable data collection. Question 17. You need to provide an administrator with the ability to manage custom RBAC roles. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which role should you assign to the administrator? The correct answer is the user access administrator. User access administrator is the least privileged role that grants access to Microsoft that authorization / role definition / right. Assigning the owner role does not follow the principle of least privilege. Contributor does not have access to Microsoft that authorization / role definition / right. Privileged role administrator grants access to manage role assignments in Microsoft Entra and all aspects of Microsoft Entra Privileged Identity Management or PIM, but this is not an RBAC role. Question 18. You have an Azure subscription named Sub1 that is linked to a Microsoft Entra tenant. The tenant contains a username admin1. Sub1 contains an Azure policy definition assignment named assignment1. The definition includes the deployed if not exist effects. You need to grant admin1 permission to include a remediation task for assignment 1. The solution must use the principle of least privilege. Which role should you assign to admin 1? The correct answer is resource policy contributor. Resource policy contributor grants permissions to create and modify a resource policy, create support ticket, and read resources in hierarchy. The owner grants full rights, which violates the principle of least privilege. Contributor does not have sufficient permissions, and the compliance administrator is a Microsoft Entra role, not an Azure RBAC role. Question 19. You create a Microsoft Entra app registration. You need to consent to the use of a given API in your app for all users. What should you add to your app registration? The correct answer is a permission. A permission allows the application to use a given API. A scope is used to request consent to run a given function on an API. An application ID URI does not handle permissions. 20. You are managing permission consent for a Microsoft Entra app registration. You already know all the permissions that an application will need. You also know which resources the application will access. You need to choose the consent type for the application. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which type of consent should you choose? The correct answer is a static user consent. In a static user consent scenario, You must specify all required permissions in the app's configurations in the Azure portal. With incremental user consent and dynamic user consent, you can ask for a bare minimum set of permissions upfront and request more over time as the customer uses additional app features. Admin consent is required when your app needs access to certain high privilege permissions, but it does not follow the principle of least privilege in this scenario. Question 21. You are managing permission scopes for a Microsoft Entra app registration. What are 3 OpenID Connect scopes that you can use? The correct answers are 1. Email, 2. Offline access, and 3. OpenID. The OpenID scope appears on the network account consent page as the sign in you page as the sign you in permission. The email scope gives the app access to a user's primary email address in the form of the email claim. The offline access scope gives you access to resources on behalf of a user for an extended time. And on the consent page, this scope appears as the maintain access to data you have given it to access permission. On the consent page, this scope appears as the maintain access to data you have given it access to permission. Question 22. You are managing permission consent for Microsoft Entra app registration. Which component displays the publisher domain? The correct answer is publisher name and verification. The publisher displays more app info as it becomes available, including the publisher name, publisher domain, data created, certification details, and the reply URLs. Publisher information, Microsoft 365 certification, and app name do not display publisher domain information. Question 23. You are creating a Microsoft Entra app registration. You are configuring credentials for the app registration and have the following requirements. 1. Ensure that the credentials are not transmitted during authentication. 2. Ensure that the credentials are stored securely. 3. Ensure that credential usage follows the principle of least privilege. What should you do? The correct answer is use certificate credentials. So here is here's an app in Microsoft Entra where you would, so if you click on the app and then you go into certificates and secrets, this is where you could upload the certificate for that app. Using certificate credentials ensures that the credentials are not transmitted during authentication, that they are stored securely, and that the credential usage follows the principle of least privilege. Question 24. Your company is expanding its use of Microsoft Azure services and needs to ensure secure access management across multiple subscriptions. You need to implement a governance model for efficient access and policy management across all Azure subscriptions. Each current answer presents part of the solution. What are 3 ways to achieve this? The correct answers are 1. Apply policies at the root management group. 2. Implement role-based access control RBAC at the management role group level, and use Azure management groups to organize subscriptions. In Microsoft, when you create a tenant, you first get that Contoso, that root group. Uh, Contoso is just a fictitious company name here. So there are many ways the company can use this arrangement to organize their subscription. But the bottom line is that you can have other management groups, and then other under those management group, like in this case, you have the marketing team management group and the IT team management group. And the IT team may have there are other management groups, and then those management groups have subscriptions. So if you apply a setting, the root group, that setting will cascade down to everything. So this is great to apply settings and permissions and RBAC, permissions in a cascading effect from top to bottom. Now, if you, for example, want to apply some settings, let's say this management group has two subscriptions. If you want to apply settings to this two subscription only, then you can apply the settings at this top over here. But if you want to, let's say, apply a setting to only this subscription, then you would do that subscription and so on. So that's what this is talking about. This is another example where you may want to, again, there are a number of ways in which this can be done depending on the company, the policies of the company. It is common, for example, to have a production subscription and a dev subscription, and like in this case, and even something like this. So you have the bottom line is that you have the management group, that's the top, then you have subscription, and then you have the resource groups. And then the individual resources are within the resource group. So the smallest component of this tenant items would be the resources themselves. Let's say, for example, a VM. So you have the resource group, and the resource group will have the VM. You have subscriptions, and then the subscription have resource group, and so on. So this is what we are talking about here. So to achieve efficient and centralized governance across multiple Azure subscriptions, using Azure management groups, implementing role-based access control at the management group level, and applying policies at the root management group are effective strategies. These actions ensure consistent policy enforcement and access management, which are critical for scaling governance. In contrast, creating separate tenants and broadly assigning the owner role would complicate management and increase security risks, making them unsuitable choices. Question 25. You use Microsoft Azure Key Vault to store secrets and keys for various applications. Concerns exist about the security of these secrets due to potential credential leaks. You need to implement a solution that allows applications to access Microsoft Azure Key Vault without managing credentials in code. What should you do? The correct answer is use managed identities for Azure resources. So if you go to the Azure portal, and right, you go into the left navigation, select enterprise applications, and in the application type column under value, you can take a look at the managed identities for applications. So using managed identities for Azure resources is the most secure solution as it follows applications to access Microsoft Azure Key Vault without managing credentials, thereby reducing the risk of leaks. Using a service principal and certificate involves managing certificates, which can be complex and less secure than using managed identities. Storing credentials in Azure Key Vault is a common misconception, as managed identities eliminate the need for credential management. Here are some of the benefits of managed identities. So first of all, credentials are fully managed, rotated, and protected by Azure. Identities are provided and deleted with Azure resources. Managed identities enable Azure resources to communicate with services that support Microsoft Entra authentication. No one, including those assigned privileged roles, have access to the credentials, which can't be accidentally leaked by being included in code. So again, this is what Microsoft recommends. Managed identities are best for communications among services that support Microsoft Entra authentication, as I just mentioned. A source system request access to a target service. Any Azure resource can be a source system. For example, an Azure virtual machine, an Azure function instance, an Azure app services instance support managed identities. Question 26. You have an Azure virtual network named VNet1. VNet1 is in a resource group named RG1. VNet1 contains the following two subnets, subnet 1 and subnet 2. You need to configure access to a storage account named SA1 in a resource group named RG2. The solution must ensure that SA1 can only be accessed from subnet 2. What should you run? And the correct answer is this one. It's the AZ storage account network rule. The key point over here is to make sure that the resource group that it needs to access from is the RG2. The correct CLI commands add a rule to allow access from the 10.0.2.0/24 subnet to the storage account. The resource group should be for RG2, as I mentioned, not RG1. The CLI commands that create a network security group, NSG rules, simply allow the entire virtual network to send requests to all storage endpoints. Question 27. You have an Azure subscription that contains the following resources. A virtual machine named VM1 that has a network interface named NIC1, a virtual network named VNet1 that has a subnet named subnet1, a public IP address named pub IP1, and a load balancer named LB1. You create a network security group NSG named NSG1. To which two resources can you associate NSG1? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. The correct answers are NIC1 and subnet1. You can associate an NSG to a virtual network subnet and network interface only. You can associate 0 or 1 NSGs to each virtual network subnet and network interface on a virtual machine. The same NSG can be associated to as many subnets and network interfaces as you choose. This is an illustration of what we just were talking about. So this NSG can be applied to at the subnet level or at the NIC level right over here. And again, you could repeat. So notice how this NSG2, it's applied at the NIC1 level on VM1, but it's also applied here at the subnet level. Not the subnet, but this is another VM. Yeah, so again, you gotta be careful when you use NSG at both the VM and the subnet level because there may be some conflicts over there. But this is basically what the question is all about. Question 28. You have a virtual network that contains an Azure Kubernetes Service AKS workload and an internal load balancer. Multiple virtual networks are managed by multiple teams. You are unable to change any of the IP addresses. You need to ensure that clients from virtual networks in your Azure subscription can access the AKS cluster by using the internal load balancer. What should you do? The correct answer here is you create a private link service on the virtual network and instruct users to access the cluster by using a private link endpoint in the virtual networks. A private link service will allow access from outside the virtual network to an endpoint by using NAT. Since you do not control the IP addressing for other virtual networks, this ensures connectivity even if IP addresses overlap. Once a private link service is used in the load balancer, other users can create a private endpoint on virtual networks to access the load balancer. Question 29. You have an Azure subscription that contains the following resources. Two virtual networks. VNet 1 contains two subnets and VNet 2 contains three subnets. Virtual machines connected to all subnets on VNet 1 and VNet 2, and a storage account named storage 1. You need to identify the minimal number of service endpoints that are required to meet the following requirements. One, virtual machines that are connected to the subnets of VNet 1 must be able to access a storage 1 over the Azure backbone, and two, virtual machines that are connected to the subnets of VNet 2 must be able to access Microsoft Entra tenant over the Azure backbone. How many service endpoints should you recommend? The correct answer here is 5. A service endpoint is configured for a specific server at the subnet level. Based on the requirements, you need to configure two service endpoints for Microsoft Data Storage on VNet 1 because VNet 1 has two subnets, and three service endpoints for Microsoft that Azure Active Directory on VNet 2 because VNet 2 has three subnets. So the minimum number of service endpoints that you must configure is 5. So this is an example of what the service endpoint would look like. So again, you have um, access to the entire Azure service, not just a specific instance as in a private endpoint, because it is very easy to get confused between a service endpoint and a private endpoint. And as a matter of fact, this is an important point that you got to pay attention for the exam. So here is a private endpoint. The private endpoint, you get access to a specific instance, for example, like a SQL database. Question 30, and I basically provided the answer. You have an Azure subscription that contains a virtual network named VNet 1. You plan to deploy an Azure App Service web app named Web 1. You need to be able to deploy Web 1 to the subnet of VNet 1. The solution must minimize costs. Which principle or which pricing plan rather should you use for Web 1? And the correct answer is isolated. Only the isolated pricing plan tier can be deployed to a virtual network subnet, and that's where the problem is here. With other pricing plans, inbound traffic, it's always routed to the public IP address of the web app, while web app outbound traffic can reach the endpoint on a virtual network. So this question can be confusing at first because the isolated pricing tier is usually more expensive than other tiers. But the problem is that in this specific case, um, the isolated pricing tier is the only one that can be connected to a network subnet. And again, so um, this is what it would look like basically. So you have a web server that is connected to a subnet, and then you need to connect that database. That's why you need that isolated tier. Question 31. You have an Azure subscription that contains a virtual machine named VM1 and a storage account named Storage1. You need to ensure that VM1 can access a Storage1 over the Azure backbone. What should you implement? Again, another one that is a little bit tricky between private endpoints and service endpoints. Just be careful about that. The correct answer is actually service endpoints because of the reason that I explained previously. Service endpoints route the traffic inside of Azure Backbone, allowing access to the entire service. For example, all Microsoft SQL servers or the storage accounts for all customers. Private endpoints provide access to a specific instance. A subnet does not allow isolation or route traffic to the Azure backbone, and a VPN gateway does not allow traffic isolation to all resources. Here's more illustration about the private endpoint, the service endpoint rather, in this case, that have access to the entire SQL. And then here is the the private link or private endpoint, right, that connect to a specific instance, and also using a private IP. So private endpoints provide access to a specific instance of an Azure resource. It uses a private IP address from your VNet, and it offers greater security and isolation by removing the need to use public IPs. So when comparing private endpoints and service endpoints, Microsoft recommends using Azure Private Link. Private Link offers better capabilities in terms of privately accessing paths from on-premises in built data exfiltration protection and mapping service to private IP in your own network. So again, important to consider this for the exam. Question 32. You host a web app on an Azure virtual machine. Users access the app through a public load balancer. You need to offload SSL traffic to the web app at the edge. What should you do? The correct answer here is configure Azure front door and switch access to the app via an internal load balancer. Front door allows for SSL offloading at the edge, and that's the key to this question, and can route traffic to an internal load balancer. Traffic Manager does not perform SSL offloading. Should be does not perform. That's an error there. Neither Azure Firewall nor an application gateway can be deployed at the edge. So when we're talking about the edge, basically means that it covers the entire Azure ecosystem, the entire regions, all the regions all over the world. That's what front door it's all about. So you could do SSL offloading about uh, at the front door level and the app gateway level. But again, app gateway it's not at the edge. Some more information about the components that of the sentence over here and what the answer. So Azure Front Door, it's edge capable and it does SSL offloading. As I just said, the application gateway can do SSL offloading, but it is not edge capable. Question 33. You have an Azure App Service web app named App1. You need to configure network controls for App1. App1 must only allow user access through Azure Front Door. Which two components should you implement? The correct answers are 1. Access restriction based on service tag, and 2. Header filters. Traffic from front door to the app originates from a well-known set of IP ranges defined in the Azure front door backend service tag. This includes every front door. To ensure traffic only originates from your specific instance, you will need to further filter the incoming requests based on the unique HTTP header that front door sends. So here we have an example of like a network security group when you can choose a service tag as the source, and then the source service tag in this case would be the Azure Front Door backend, and that will include all the IP addresses assigned to the front door, and that way you don't have to, because Microsoft has tons of IP addresses for Azure Front Door, and you don't want to manage that because those IP addresses could be changed at any point. So that's why service tag is good in this case. Question 34. Your company has multiple Microsoft Azure resources that need secure internet access with encrypted data in transit to meet compliance. You need to implement a solution that encrypts data in transit for these resources. What should you recommend? The correct answer is implement Transport Layer Security, or TLS. Implementing Transport Layer Security (TLS) is the correct recommendation because it encrypts data in transit, ensuring security and compliance. Azure Storage Service Encryption is related to encryption but focuses on data at rest, not in transit. Azure VPN Gateway provides secure connections but is not specifically for encrypting data in transit for Azure resources. An Azure Web Application Firewall, or WAF, addresses a different security concern, not the encryption of data in transit. Question 35. Your organization is deploying a new web application that requires protection against common web vulnerability such as SQL injection and cross-site scripting. The application will be hosted on Microsoft Azure and needs to handle high traffic efficiently. You need to implement security and load balancing for the web application while ensuring compliance with OWASP standards. Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Which two actions should you perform? The correct answers are 1. Configure Azure Application Gateway with a public IP, and 2. Enable WAF on Azure Application Gateway. Configuring Azure Application Gateway with a public IP allows the application to handle high traffic efficiently by being accessible from the internet. Enabling WAF on Azure Application Gateway provides protection against web vulnerabilities by using OWASP rules, which include defenses against SQL injection and cross-site scripting. Deploying Azure from door does not provide the necessary security features like WAF to protect against web vulnerabilities, making it unsuitable for the scenario security requirements. And implementing Azure Load Balancer is not suitable as it provides load balancing but lacks the security features like WAF, which are essential for protecting against web vulnerabilities. You create an Azure policy by using the following snippet. You need to ensure that the policy is applied whenever a new storage account is created or updated. There is no managed identity assigned to the policy initiative. Which effect should you use? The correct answer is append. Append is used to add fields to existing properties. Modify is used to add, update, or remove properties. It does not ensure that a field has value. Deploy, if not exist, is used to deploy resources. And audit is used to check for compliance. Question 37. You have an Azure subscription that contains 2 Azure Key Vault resources. You need to ensure that all the secrets in any Key Vault in the subscription meet the following requirements. 1. Secrets can be active for up to 365 days. 2. Secret must have an expiration date set. 3. Secrets must have a content type set. And 4. The solution must minimize administrator effort. What should you do? The correct answer is use built-in policies and link an initiative to the subscription. Using built-in policies and linking an initiative to the subscription will apply to all the Key Vault resources in the subscription. You do not need to use custom policies, and linking to the resources will not affect new Key Vaults. Question 39. You are configuring an Azure policy in your environment. You need to ensure that any resources that are missing a tag named cost center inherit a value from a resource group. You create a custom policy that uses the following snippet. Make sure that you read and try to understand what this snippet is telling you, what it's about. If you do not understand this, then obviously you need to go back to your reading. Which policy mode should you use? The correct answer is indexed. Index mode ensures that the policy skips resource groups. All includes resources groups, which cannot be nested. Append and deploy if not exist are policy effects. So this is question 39. The previous was 38. I thought I called the previous one 39. Anyways, you have an Azure subscription that contains a user named admin1. You need to ensure that admin1 can access the regulatory compliance dashboard in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which 2 roles should you assign to admin1? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. The correct answers are A, resource policy contributor, and the security admin. To use the regulatory compliance in Defender for Cloud, you must have sufficient permissions. At a minimum, you must be assigned the resource policy contributor and the security admin roles. All right, so here is Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and this is the regulatory compliance, which is right here. And when you click on it, so you have the Azure Security Benchmark version 3, ISO 27001, PCI DSS, HIPAA, NIST, etc. And of course, there's a lot more that you can add. Those are the ones that are visible. And then if you drill down, so here we are on the NIST SP 853R4, right? And that's listed over here. So you could click on that. And these are the access controls. They are listed as AC1, AC2, etc. These are all these access controls. And when you click on one of them, you can drill down. So this is the access control, and there are sub-access controls, right? Like for example, this one, automated system account management. And then when you click on one of these, you can go to the app review, or you can go to your actions to see what is it that you need to do in order to implement it and so forth. But anyway, so this is what the regulatory compliance is in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So here you can investigate for issues. Just as I said, you drill down and click, and once you go into the control details, and for example, the AC 2.7 role-based access scheme, right? This is an automated action. Service fabric cluster should only use Azure Active Directory. This is part of the compliance, so you check that, and that will be done. So important notice is that assessments run approximately every 12 hours. So you will see the impact on your compliance data only after the next run of the relevant assessment. More information about this would be disk encryption should be applied on all virtual machines. For example, again, once you choose those virtual machines, then that will be applied. And here, this is the list of the unhealthy resources, and they're listing like 107. But anyway, so great rundown. This is more about this encryption, etc. You could also remediate stuff manually following the instructions over here. So regulatory compliance has automated and manual assessment that might need to be remediated. So manual assessments are assessments that require input from the customers to remediate them. Okay. You could generate compliance status reports and certificates again, and then you could download those reports based on whatever it is the compliance that you need. Those reports can be in either CSV format or PDF. Okay. More information here about ISIT, so you can audit the reports as well. Tons of stuff that you can do with this. Continuously export compliance status. So if you want, for example, to track your compliance status with all the monitoring tools in your environment, Defender for Cloud includes an export mechanisms to make this straightforward. So you can configure continuous export to send select data to an Azure Event Hubs or a log analytics workspace, for example. Okay. And so if you go to settings, you go continuous export, you choose the regulatory, the type of data that you want to, and where you want that data to go. You could also create a trigger or workflow when the assessment change. For example, Defender for Cloud's workflow automation features can trigger logic apps whenever one of your regulatory compliance assessment changes the state. For example, you might want Defender for Cloud to email a specific user when a compliance assessment fails. You need to first create the logic app using the Azure Logic Apps and then set up the trigger in a workflow automation as explained, shown over here. You could also, there's a documentation that you could go in that would explain that as well. Question 40, your company has a multi-cloud online environment. You plan to use Microsoft Defender for Cloud to protect all supported online environments. Which three environments support Defender for Cloud? The correct answer is Amazon Web Services, AWS, Azure DevOps, and GitHub. Defender for Cloud protects those three, but do not protect Alibaba Cloud or Oracle Cloud. Question 41. You have an Azure subscription. You need to assign a security policy to the subscription. Which Microsoft Defender for Cloud settings should you use? The correct answer is environment settings. Environment settings allows you to select the Azure subscription and then select security policy. From here, or rather there, you can assign a security policy to the subscription. So here is what we're talking about. So if you go to Home, uh, you go to the Azure portal, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, environment settings, and this is where you can create the policy. And it will look something like this once you do it. And you could also use the query editor. So Microsoft recommends using the query editor to create a recommendation query, for example. You could also create a custom standard here. Custom recommendations can be assigned to one or more custom standards. And these are the steps on how to do that as well. Question 42. You set periodic recurring scans to on while implementing a Microsoft Defender for SQL vulnerability assessment. How often will this scan be triggered? The correct answer is once a week. Recurring scans will be triggered once a week. These values cannot be changed and is set by Microsoft. So you could enable Microsoft Defender for Azure SQL databases at the subscription level in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And here are the instructions on how to do that. Once you do that, you can enable Microsoft Defender also at the resource level, subscription or source level. So Microsoft recommend enabling Microsoft Defender plans at the subscription level so that new resources are automatically protected. Once you do that, then you can manage the Defender for SQL settings. For example, once it's enabled, you can click on configure, and then here you'll see a list of recommendations, the security alerts, the findings, and that kind of stuff. So again, here is the set to on, okay? There's also some event settings that you can configure. But anyway, so Microsoft Defender for SQL is enabled. And again, you can configure, there's a number of things that will allow you to protect your databases. 43, you are implementing a Microsoft Defender for SQL vulnerability assessment. Where are these scan results stored? In an Azure storage account. So the scan results must be stored in an Azure storage account. The results can be sent to the Azure Monitor workspace or Microsoft Sentinel from the initial location. The results are stored outside of the database. This is the key point here. Question 44. You are implementing Microsoft Defender for SQL vulnerability assessment. In which two locations can users view the results? The correct answer is the Azure Blob Storage account and the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which we just kind of touch up on this in the previous question. So Defender for Cloud is the default and mandatory location to view the results, while a Blob Storage account is a mandatory destination and a prerequisite for enabling the scan. The Teams option is unavailable out of the box, and a scan has nothing to do with that. And a scan completion event is not sent to event grid. Again, we already saw this before, but this is the Microsoft Defender for Cloud portal where you can see those alerts and findings. Okay, we've seen this again. Question 45. You have a data connector for Microsoft Sentinel. You need to configure the connector to collect logs from conditional access in Microsoft Entra. Which log should you connect to Microsoft Sentinel? And the correct answer is signing logs. Signing logs include information about sign-ins and how resources are used by your users. Audit logs include information about changes applied to your tenant, such as user or group management or updates applied to your tenant's resources. Activity logs include subscription level events, not tenant level activity, and provisioning logs include activities performed by the provisioning service, such as the creation of a group in ServiceNow or a user imported from Workday. Question 46. You need to implement a key management solution that supports importing keys generated in an on-premises environment. The solution must ensure that the keys stay within a single Azure region. What should you do? You need to implement, actually, the answer is implement Azure Key Vault Manage HSM. Key Vault Managed HSM supports importing keys generated in an on-premise HSM. Also, Managed HSM does not store or process customer data outside the Azure region in which the customer deploys the HSM instance. On-premises generated keys are still managed. After implementing Key Vault Firewall, enforcing HSM bad keys does not enforce them to be imported. Disabling the Allow Trusted Services option does not have a direct impact on key importing. Question 47. You need to grant an application access to read connection strings stored in Azure Key Vault. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which role assignment should you use? And obviously the correct answer here is Key Vault Secret User. Key Vault Secrets user allows read access to secret content. The Key Vault Crypto Officer allows the user to perform actions on encryption keys, not secrets. The Key Vault Reader allows the users to read the metadata of Key Vaults and its certificates, keys, and secrets, but not to read sensitive values such as secret contents or Key Vault material. And Key Vault Secrets Officer does not follow the principle of least privilege. Question 48. A company has recently expanded its cloud infrastructure and needs to ensure compliance with industry standards using Microsoft Defender for Cloud. You need to configure Microsoft Defender for Cloud to access compliance across all cloud platforms. Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Which three actions should you perform? Answers are 1. Add custom compliance standards. 2. Connect additional cloud accounts. And 3. Enable Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark MCSB plan. Adding custom compliance standards allow for tailored assessments that meet the specific organizational requirements. Connecting additional cloud accounts enables Microsoft Defender for Cloud to access compliance across these platforms. Enabling the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, MCSB, a plan provides baseline security and compliance assessment for connected cloud platforms, and relying primarily on manual assessment might lead to inefficiencies and incomplete compliance evaluations, as some aspects required automation for thoroughness. Question 49. Um, your organization uses Microsoft Defender for Cloud to manage security compliance across multiple cloud environments. The compliance team notices discrepancies in the compliance status reports generated from the regulatory compliance dashboard. You need to ensure that the compliance data is consistently updated and accurately reflects the current state of your cloud resources. Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Which three actions should you take? The correct answer is enable continuous export to a log analytics workspace. Um, Two, integrate with the Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager. And three, schedule assessment every 12 hours. Enabling continuous export to a Microsoft Log Analytics workspace ensures that compliance data is consistently updated and available for analysis. Scheduling regular assessment helps maintain the accuracy of compliance data by capturing recent changes. Integrating with Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager centralizes compliance data, providing a comprehensive view across all environments. Enabling manual compliance checks might seem beneficial but does not ensure real-time accuracy, and weekly snapshots may seem like a viable option but do not provide real-time updates. This is again a screenshot of the Microsoft Defender for Cloud regulatory compliance that we saw before, and just to show how this relates to the question. This is where all the compliance is managed and configured. Question 50 out of 50, finally. Your organization uses Microsoft Defender for Cloud to secure Azure, AWS, and GCP environments. The security team must protect all virtual machines VMs from vulnerabilities and threats. You need to implement continuous vulnerability assessment and threat detection for these VMs without deploying additional agents. What should you do? And the correct answer is enable agentless scanning in Microsoft Defender for servers. Enabling agentless scanning in Microsoft Defender for servers provides the required continuous vulnerability assessment and threat detection without deploying additional agents, aligning with the organization's multi-cloud strategy. Using Microsoft Defender for Cloud's built-in tool would require additional agents, which is not desired. Using Microsoft Defender for Cloud's agent-based threat detection is limited to Azure and requires agents failing to meet the multi-cloud environment. And again, here's the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. You could connect to other cloud platforms like AWS and GCP, and which is what you know the question it's all about here. Um, you could enable plans, right? Which is the cloud security posture management. Obviously, to protect anything in AWS, it needs to be connected to AWS first, right? So you go to environment settings, and then you need to configure. These are all the platforms that you can connect to. And obviously, you need to have an account on the other platform, and you need to have the proper permission to do so. And with that, we conclude this assessment. Thank you for watching. If you find this content useful, give me a like, subscribe to my channel to keep updated. I will be adding more content about not just Microsoft certifications, but also Security Plus, CISSP, um, ISACA, CEH. So this channel, it's going to be mainly about practice questions for security certification. So to keep posted, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.